Poor Waitress bought a coffee for a struggling dad and his daughter, not knowing he was a millionaire. The morning rush had barely begun when Emily pushed open the back door of Riverside Cafe, cold air still clinging to her thin jacket. The smell of burnt espresso, old pastries, and cheap cleaning spray floated in the air, familiar enough to feel like a second skin. She tied her apron with practiced speed, rubbing her hands together for warmth. The heater in her tiny rented room had died again last night, and she'd spent hours curled beneath 2 blankets, trying not to shiver loud enough to wake the tenant in the room next door. She grabbed her notepad, tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, and forced the brightest smile she could manage. She always told herself, customers shouldn't see the weight you carry. By 7:05 a.m., the bell above the cafe door chimed softly, and that was when she saw them. A man in a worn gray hoodie and jeans, holding the hand of a little girl no older than 5. The girl's blonde curls were messy, her coat too thin for early winter chill, her sneakers damp from melted frost. The father had tired eyes, the kind that came from long nights, not enough sleep, and maybe too many worries stacked on top of one another. They approached the counter slowly, the little girl clinging to his sleeve. Emily noticed the way he hesitated before looking up at the menu board, as if calculating prices he already knew he couldn't afford. She'd seen that look before, on herself, especially during the months after her mother passed. She stepped forward gently. "Good morning," she said, careful to keep her voice soft. The man gave a polite nod. "Morning. Do you guys happen to have kids' hot chocolate?" Emily smiled. "We do. And it's a good one." The little girl peeked from behind his arm. "Does it come with the tiny marshmallows?" Emily leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice with playful secrecy. "It does if you ask nicely." The girl's eyes lit up, but then the father reached into his pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills and coins. He counted them once. Then again, his shoulders sank almost imperceptibly. "Sweetheart," he whispered to his daughter, "maybe we just get one and share, okay?" The little girl nodded bravely, but Emily caught the disappointment she tried to hide. The cold outside wasn't nearly as sharp as the sting in Emily's chest. She thought of her own childhood, how her mother used to skip meals so Emily could have one decent lunch a day. How kindness sometimes came from strangers because life didn't spare the weak. Without giving herself time to think, Emily tapped a button on the register and said, "2 hot chocolates, 1 kid-sized with marshmallows, 1 regular, and a small coffee." The father blinked. "Oh, sorry, I don't think we can." "It's taken care of," she said quickly. "Start of the day special." It wasn't a real promotion, but no one else needed to know that. The man shook his head. "Miss, you don't have to. I know," she said, offering a warm but firm smile. "But I want to." The little girl tugged gently at Emily's apron. "Thank you," she whispered, holding out a glittery sticker shaped like a star. Emily laughed softly and accepted it, placing it carefully on the corner of her notepad. Behind them, the espresso machine hissed. The man's voice turned quiet. "You're very kind." Kind. People didn't call her that often. Mostly they called her next, or "Hey waitress," or sometimes nothing at all. "I hope things get easier for you," she replied gently, handing him the paper cups. "Both of you." She didn't know why she said it. Something in his tired eyes told her he needed to hear it. The man cleared his throat and forced a small, grateful smile. "They already are." And then they left, 2 figures stepping back into the cold morning air, steam curling from their cups like little ghosts. Emily didn't know it yet, but that $3 cup of coffee was the first domino in a chain of events that would change her life forever. Emily watched the door swing shut behind the father and his little girl, the faint jingle of the bell fading as they disappeared into the cold. She let out a slow breath, pressing her palm against the counter to steady herself. It had been years since she used money from her own tips to cover a stranger's order. She could barely cover her own bills, and yet something about that small girl's brave smile, something about the way the father whispered, "Maybe we share one," had cracked open a place inside Emily that she thought life had hardened long ago. The morning rush picked up quickly, customers lining up with the usual impatience. Emily worked with mechanical focus, pouring coffee, wiping tables, forcing cheerfulness into each "good morning," even as her mind drifted back to the little girl's star-shaped sticker still stuck to the corner of her notepad. At 11 a.m., her manager called her into the back room. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting a tired glow over the stacks of supply boxes. Emily. He began in the same flat tone he used for every conversation. I need to cut someone's hours this week. Corporate is tightening labor budgets again. Her stomach tightened. She already worked 2 jobs, and losing even one shift meant choosing between rent and groceries. Please, she said quietly. I really need the hours. He rubbed the back of his neck. I know. But look, you were the last one in, first one cut. You understand how this works. She did. But understanding did not make it any easier. By the time she walked home after her shift, the city air had turned sharp, the sidewalks glistening with thin layers of frost. She wrapped her jacket tighter, wishing it were thicker or newer or something more than what it was. Her room was a 10-minute walk from the cafe, inside an aging apartment building that smelled faintly of old carpet and cheap detergent. The stairs creaked under her feet as she climbed to the 2nd floor. When she unlocked her door, the silence inside greeted her like a familiar ache. The heater had struggled all day, coughing out weak gusts of lukewarm air. She plugged in the small electric kettle she had bought secondhand and heated water for instant noodles. That was dinner, at least until payday. She pulled out her worn notebook and flipped it open. At the top of the first page were the words she had written years ago, nursing school. Below it, her budget notes crossed out again and again. Tuition was impossible. Rent was barely possible. Everything else felt like a dream meant for someone with a different life. She sighed and closed the notebook, sliding it beneath a loose floorboard where she kept the things that mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from her landlord. Rent is due today. Reminder. She swallowed hard. She had 3 days before he started adding. Late fees. She lay back on her thin mattress, pulling a blanket up to her chin. The cold seeped through the walls, but exhaustion settled heavy over her, making her eyes sting. She thought about the father's tired eyes, the little girl's hopeful smile. She wondered where they were now, if they found warmth, if the hot chocolate helped even a little. Strangely, thinking about them softened something inside her that the world kept trying to harden. She drifted to sleep with that small warmth lingering in her chest. The next morning, Emily returned to the cafe for her shortened shift. She pushed open the door and stepped inside, expecting another slow day. Instead, her manager looked up sharply. Emily, he said, someone dropped this off for you. On the counter sat a small paper bag with her name written in neat handwriting. Emily blinked, confused. She opened the bag. Inside was a single item, the same star-shaped sticker the little girl had given her, now laminated carefully like a keepsake. And beneath it, a folded note. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There were only 4 words written inside, 4 words that sent a quiet shiver down her spine and made her heart beat a little faster. Thank you for kindness. No signature. No clue. Just those 4 words. And for reasons she did not understand yet, they felt like the beginning of something that was already moving toward her life. Unstoppable and unexpected, like a tide turning in her favor at last. Emily stared at the small note for a long moment. Her breath caught somewhere between confusion and an emotion she did not quite recognize. It was not the message itself, but the care behind it. Someone had taken the time to laminate the little girl's sticker, as if preserving a memory that mattered. She tucked the note safely into her apron pocket before her manager could make a comment, and went back to wiping the counter, though her hands shook slightly. The bell above the door chimed, bringing in a rush of cold air along with a group of office workers. She slipped into her routine, forcing a smile, pouring coffees, taking orders. But every few minutes, her hand brushed the note in her pocket, grounding her in a way she could not explain. When her shortened shift ended, she clocked out and hesitated near the door. She had nowhere particular to go, and her room felt colder than the street outside, so she wandered toward the community center 2 blocks away. It was a place she had visited only once before, hoping they might have part-time shifts or volunteer hours she could turn into a future reference. The red brick building stood quiet in the late afternoon light, its windows fogged from the heat inside. She pushed the door open, greeted by the faint smell of crayons and old books. A woman behind the front desk looked up. Back again? She asked warmly. Emily nodded. I was hoping to check the job postings again. The woman handed her a binder. Things change weekly. You never know. Emily flipped through pages of low-wage positions and volunteer listings, trying hard not to feel discouraged. She was closing the binder when she heard laughter echoing down the hallway, a child's laughter. The sound tugged at her, familiar in a way she could not place. She turned just as a small figure in a purple coat dashed into the lobby. It was the same little girl from the cafe. Her curls bounced as she ran straight toward Emily. "It is you," the girl cried, throwing her arms around Emily's legs. Emily froze, startled, then smiled gently. "Hello again. You remember me?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "You made the best hot chocolate in the whole world." Before Emily could respond, she saw the father jogging in from the hallway, slightly out of breath. He stopped when he saw Emily, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Wow," he said softly. "I did not expect to see you here." Emily felt suddenly self-conscious, tugging at her apron she had forgotten to take off. "I, sometimes come here looking for extra work." The father nodded as if he understood more than she said. "We come here for the kids' reading hour. My daughter loves the stories." The girl reached up to hold Emily's hand. "Can she listen with us, Daddy?" He chuckled. "I think she might have things to do, sweetheart." Normally, Emily would have agreed and excused herself, but something about the little girl's hopeful eyes made her pause. "I can stay for one story," she said softly. The girl let out a delighted squeal and tugged her toward the reading room. The father followed, and for the next 30 minutes, Emily sat beside them on the colorful rug, listening to a volunteer read a story about a brave little fox. The girl rested her head against Emily's arm halfway through. Emily froze at first, unsure if she should move, but the child's warmth, the gentle trust, melted through her like sunlight. When story time ended, the girl hugged her again. "Are you coming back tomorrow?" Emily smiled. "Maybe." The father stepped closer, hands in his pockets. "You know," he said quietly, "I never got to thank you properly for what you did yesterday." Emily looked down. "It was just a cup of coffee." "Maybe to you," he replied, "but not to us." His voice carried a sincerity that made her chest tighten. He hesitated, then asked, "Do you have a few minutes? There is something I actually want to talk about." Emily blinked, caught off guard by the sudden seriousness in his tone. She nodded slowly. And that was when everything began to shift. Because the conversation he was leading her toward was not just gratitude. It was something bigger, something she was not prepared for, something that would pull her into a world she never imagined touching. Emily followed the father out into the hallway, her heart beating a little faster, though she could not explain why. The community center had grown quiet as families drifted out into the cold evening, their footsteps echoing softly against the tile floor. He paused near a small bench by the window, the fading sunlight casting warm orange lines across his face. His daughter skipped ahead, humming to herself as she examined drawings taped to the wall. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to say more than just thank you," he began. "What you did yesterday, it was more than kindness. It meant something to my daughter. And to me." Emily shifted her weight, feeling suddenly shy. "I just did what anyone would do." He gave a small, almost sad smile. "You would be surprised how many people look the other way." She did not know what to say to that, so she stayed quiet, letting him continue. "My name is Ethan," he said, offering his hand. "Ethan Cole." She shook it gently. "Emily." His handshake was warm but polite, steady in a way that hinted he was trying not to overwhelm her. "Emily," he repeated, as if testing her name on his tongue. "I was actually hoping to see you again." She blinked, thrown off. "Wait. You left a note at the cafe?" He hesitated for a moment. "Yes. My daughter insisted we give you something, and I agreed." Emily looked down, rubbing the edge of her apron between her fingers. "It was sweet. Thank you." Ethan glanced toward his daughter, who was trying very hard to peel a sticker off one of the posters without being noticed. He sighed. "Come here, Nora," he called. The little girl ran back to her father's side. Ethan knelt so he could look her in the eye. "Do you want to tell Miss Emily why we came back today?" Nora nodded eagerly. "Daddy said people who do nice things deserve nice things back." Emily felt her breath catch. Ethan stood again, meeting her eyes with a seriousness that made the room feel smaller. "It is true," he said softly. "You helped us on a day when things were complicated." He paused as if weighing his next words. "I have been going through a difficult time, and I might have looked like someone barely holding things together yesterday. That was true. But there is something else I need to tell you." Emily felt the world shift slightly, not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet, unmistakable way a door opens to a room you did not know existed. Ethan inhaled slowly. I was not completely honest about who I am, he said. Not to you, and not to most people these days. Emily frowned. I do not understand. Nora tugged her father's sleeve. Daddy, show her. Ethan hesitated, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a sleek black card holder. From it, he took a single card and held it out to Emily. She looked down. Her eyes widened. The card read, Ethan Cole, founder and chief executive officer, Coltech Innovations. She blinked again, certain she must be reading it wrong. You are a chief executive officer? He nodded slowly. Yes. And the reason I was dressed the way I was yesterday, the reason I seemed like I had nothing together, was because I have been going undercover for the last couple of weeks. Emily stared at him, unable to process it all at once. Undercover? Why would a chief executive officer do that? Ethan leaned against the bench as if the truth itself carried weight. Because I needed to know something, he said. There have been issues in my company, problems with the culture. I wanted to see the world outside my boardroom, to understand how people live, how they are treated, how they struggle, how they survive. Emily's pulse quickened. Suddenly the exhaustion in his eyes from yesterday made sense. But so did the calm steadiness beneath it. So you were not actually struggling? She asked softly. Ethan shook his head. Not financially, but in other ways, yes. Nora slipped her hand into Emily's. He was sad, she whispered. Emily felt a tug in her chest. Ethan watched her closely. You treated us with kindness, he said. Honest, simple kindness. The kind you cannot fake or buy. And that is why I wanted to talk to you today. Emily swallowed, unsure where this was going. Ethan continued. There is something I want to offer you. Not charity, not pity. A chance. But only if you want to hear it. Emily stared at him. The room suddenly silent except for the hum of the heater. She did not know what this man, this chief executive officer, was about to say. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life was no longer moving in the same direction it had yesterday morning. Something had shifted. Something big. And it was standing right in front of her, waiting for her answer. Emily felt her pulse quicken as she stood there, Ethan's card still trembling between her fingers. The weight of his words pressed on her chest, and for a moment she could not tell if the air in the hallway had grown warmer or if her body was simply trying to keep up with everything unfolding around her. A chance? She repeated softly, unsure whether she sounded curious or terrified. Ethan nodded, his expression steady but gentle, as if he understood she might bolt if he moved too quickly. Let me explain, he said. When you helped us at the cafe, you did not know who I was. You did not hesitate. You did not judge. You just cared. People do not realize how rare that is. Emily lowered her eyes, embarrassed. It was just a cup of coffee. No, he said firmly. It was dignity. You gave my daughter comfort, and you gave me something I had not felt in a long time. Humanity. The quiet. Sincerity in his voice caught her off guard, pulling at something deep inside her. Nora tugged on Emily's apron, smiling up at her as if she had known her forever. The warmth of that little hand was almost enough to steady Emily's breathing. Almost. Ethan straightened slightly. I run a foundation, he continued. A large one. We fund community programs, scholarships, outreach projects, healthcare initiatives. And we are expanding. I need people with heart. People who understand struggle. People who do not look down on others because they once stood there themselves. Emily blinked. Why are you telling me this? Because, he said, I want to offer you a position. Paid. Stable. A path forward. You would help coordinate community partnerships and support programs like this one. You already have the instinct for it. She shook her head quickly, panic rising. I cannot do something like that. I do not have a degree. I barely made it through high school. I have no training, no certification, no experience outside serving coffee and taking orders. Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm, but full of certainty. You have experience that matters. You have empathy. You have resilience. You have the exact qualities we look for when building programs meant to lift people up. But I would not know what to do, Emily whispered. You would learn, he replied. We train every new coordinator. You would not be alone. Emily felt a twisting ache inside her chest. The offer sounded unreal, like something meant for a version of her that lived in a different world. Not the girl who counted tips to afford instant noodles. Not the girl whose rental heater barely worked. Not the girl who hid a notebook full of unreachable dreams under a loose floorboard. She forced herself to steady her voice. Why me? You do not even know me. Ethan's expression shifted then, not pity, but something more earnest. I know what I saw, he said. A woman who treated a stranger with kindness when she had almost nothing herself. That is the kind of person I want on my team. That is the kind of person the world needs. Nora nodded vigorously. I think you are amazing, she declared, as if that settled anything. Somehow, it shook Emily more than Ethan's offer did. She looked down at the little girl, unable to stop her lips from curving into a small, fragile smile. But then reality returned like a cold gust of wind. I have rent due, Emily said, and my hours were cut. I cannot risk losing what little I still have. Ethan's eyes softened. I know. That is why this offer comes with immediate pay and housing assistance. Temporary, until you get back on your feet. You would not be thrown into the deep end. Housing assistance? Emily echoed, stunned. It is part of our outreach program, Ethan explained. Short-term support for new hires transitioning into stability. Emily felt her world tilt, her carefully built shell starting to crack. Stability. Support. A real job. A real path. It sounded like something she had wanted her whole life, but never believed she deserved. You do not have to decide today, Ethan added gently. But I want you to think about one thing. She looked up, her breath unsteady. What thing? Ethan held her gaze, his voice dropping to something soft, something careful, something that made the hallway feel suddenly too quiet. What if the future you always wanted is finally knocking? Emily swallowed hard, her heart thudding in her ears. She did not know if she was ready for a future that big, or a choice that terrifying. But she could feel it. The shift. The possibility. The way her life, for the first time in years, felt like it was cracking open and letting light in. And she had no idea yet how far that light would reach. Emily stood frozen in that hallway long after Ethan finished speaking, her thoughts circling in frantic loops, as if trying to make sense of a world that no longer matched the one she had woken up to that morning. The offer felt too large, too bright, too unreal to belong in her hands. She kept expecting someone to step out from behind a door and laugh, as if this were some elaborate misunderstanding. But Ethan stood quietly, patiently, as though he understood she needed time for the ground beneath her to stop shifting. Nora squeezed Emily's fingers again. You would be really good at helping people, she said with the simple certainty only children had. Emily managed a breathy laugh. You do not even know me, sweet girl. I know enough, Nora replied confidently. And somehow, that small vote of trust struck deeper than anything. Emily finally found her voice. I need time, she whispered, afraid the moment would break if she spoke too loudly. Ethan nodded immediately. Of course. Take as much time as you need. Just promise me you will think about it seriously. Your future should not be decided by fear. She nodded slowly, grateful he did not push. They walked together toward the entrance of the community center, Nora humming softly while swinging Emily's hand. The cold evening air greeted them as they stepped outside, the last traces of daylight fading behind the rooftops. Ethan pulled his hood up against the wind. May I walk you home? He asked. You do not have to, she said automatically. I know, he replied, but I would like to. Emily hesitated. She was not used to anyone offering her anything, not safety, not help, not companionship. She had taught herself to decline things before she even fully processed them. But this time, she surprised herself. All right, she said quietly. The three of them walked together down the sidewalk, their breath forming soft clouds in the air. Emily felt strangely aware of the rhythm of their footsteps, of Nora skipping ahead, then circling back to take both their hands. It felt peaceful, almost like a family, though she shook that thought away before it settled too comfortably. When they reached her apartment building, she felt suddenly embarrassed by the chipped paint on the door and the dim hallway light that flickered every few seconds. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. This is me, she said, her cheeks warming with self-consciousness. Ethan looked up at the narrow staircase, then back at her with no judgment in his eyes, only a quiet understanding. Thank you for letting us walk with you, he said. And for listening. Emily nodded. Thank you for telling me the truth. He smiled, a small, warm expression. If you decide to consider the offer, call the number on the back of the card. It goes directly to me. Nora wrapped her arms around Emily's waist in a spontaneous hug. Bye, Miss Emily. I hope you say yes. Emily hugged her back, overwhelmed by the sincerity of a child who did not know how to hide her heart. "We will see," she whispered. After Ethan and Nora left, Emily climbed the stairs to her hallway, the building creaking around her. When she reached her door, she leaned her forehead against the wood, exhaling a long, shaky breath. Inside her room, she set her keys down and sank onto the edge of her bed. She took out Ethan's business card and stared at it. Founder and Chief Executive Officer, the bold letters read. She traced the embossed logo with her thumb. It felt like holding a key to a world she had never been allowed to enter. Her phone buzzed. A reminder, rent due. She closed her eyes. Fear tugged at her. What if she accepted and failed? What if she disappointed everyone? What if she lost even the little she had? But another voice whispered softly inside her. What if you rise? Emily opened her notebook, the one she hid beneath the floorboard, and looked at the first page. Nursing school, her dream written in faded ink. Something warm spread through her chest, as if the universe had cracked open a tiny window of possibility. She held Ethan's card over the page, and for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to imagine a life where she did not have to struggle alone. And she felt it, unmistakably. Hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. Emily woke up the next morning with Ethan's business card still resting on her notebook, the faint imprint of its edges pressed into the page as if the decision itself had begun carving a place inside her life. For a moment, she simply stared at it, feeling the familiar weight of fear rise in her throat. She had spent years surviving by staying small, avoiding risks, avoiding disappointments. Safety, even in struggle, felt predictable. Opportunity felt dangerous. But something about Ethan's voice from the night before lingered in her mind. The way he had said, "What if the future you always wanted is finally knocking?" She tucked the card carefully into her apron pocket and headed to the cafe for her shift. The morning air was bitter, biting at her skin as she walked. Inside, the cafe was unusually busy, but Emily kept her movement steady, focusing on the rhythm of work. Pour. Smile. Wipe. Repeat. The star-shaped sticker from Nora stayed tucked behind the register, its glitter catching the overhead lights every time she moved. Around noon, as she handed a customer their receipt, the bell above the door jingled sharply. Emily looked up, expecting another office worker rushing in. Instead, she froze. A woman in expensive heels and a designer coat stood at the door, her eyes scanning the cafe with sharp precision. A photographer followed her, snapping pictures without asking. The woman approached the counter, lips curled in disdain as if the air inside the cafe offended her. "You are Emily, correct?" she asked. Emily blinked. "Yes. Can I help you?" The woman smiled, but it was not a kind smile. "I represent the Cole family press office. We have been informed that you spent time with Mr. Ethan Cole yesterday." Emily's stomach tightened. Yes, but..." "Perfect," the woman interrupted. "We would like a statement. Preferably something about how his recent undercover behavior inspired you. Our media team is trying to spin the narrative before it becomes a problem." Emily felt her pulse race. "I am sorry, but I do not understand what is happening." The woman sighed dramatically, as if Emily were slow. "News outlets found out that Mr. Cole has been pretending to be a struggling single father. They have pictures from the community center. They have your name. They know you gave him free drinks at your cafe. Now they want a story. We need to control it before it damages the company's reputation." Emily stepped back instinctively. "I did not do anything wrong." "That is debatable," the woman replied coldly, "depending on who his competitors speak to." The photographer clicked another picture, and Emily flinched. Heat rushed up her neck. "Please stop," she whispered. "I do not want to be photographed. I did not ask for any of this." The woman leaned forward. "Then give us what we need, and we will make this go away." Emily shook her head, panic clawing up her throat. "No, I am not saying anything. This has nothing to do with me." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Very well, but do not be surprised when the tabloids twist the story. They already think you targeted him on purpose." Emily's heart stopped. "What?" "It is what they do," the woman said with a shrug. "A struggling waitress, a billionaire chief executive officer pretending to be poor. The narrative writes itself." Emily felt the ground tilt. Customers had turned to watch. Her manager's face paled, and the words repeated in her mind like a nightmare. "They think you targeted him." The press woman gave a thin smile. "Expect reporters at your doorstep within the day." Then she turned sharply and walked out, the photographer trailing behind her. Emily stood there trembling as whispers filled the cafe. Her manager rushed over. "Emily, what on earth was that?" "I do not know," she said, voice cracking. "But I think I am in trouble." He ran a hand over his forehead. "This is bad for business." Those words hit her like a blow. She knew what came next even before he said it. "You should go home for the day," he said slowly. "And maybe take a few more days off until this settles." Emily swallowed hard. "Are you firing me?" "I am trying not to," he said. "But this could hurt the cafe. I have to think about that." She nodded numbly. Of course the world would twist something good into something ugly. Of course kindness would backfire. She untied her apron, her fingers shaking, and walked out of the cafe without looking back. The cold air hit her like a slap as she stepped outside. Her breath came out ragged, visible in the winter chill. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if the entire city were watching her. As she turned the corner, her phone buzzed with a message. It was from an unknown number. 3 words. "Please call me." She knew exactly who it was. Ethan. And as she stared at the screen, tears stinging her eyes, she realized the truth. Whatever chance had been offered to her was now tangled in a storm she never expected. Emily stood on the sidewalk with the cold wind slicing through her thin jacket, her phone buzzing in her hand like a warning she was scared to face. She stared at the message from the unknown number, though she knew perfectly well it was from Ethan. "Please call me." 3 simple words, yet they felt impossibly heavy, pulling at her chest until she could hardly breathe. She closed her eyes, trying to steady her trembling fingers. Reporters had not found her yet, but she could feel the danger closing in like storm clouds gathering above her head. People walked past, their footsteps crunching over patches of old snow, unaware that her world had just been turned upside down. She swallowed hard, took a shaky breath, and finally pressed the call button. Ethan answered on the first ring. "Emily." His voice was tight, urgent, filled with a worry that made her chest tighten even more. "Are you safe? Did anyone bother you?" She wrapped her free arm around herself. "Some woman came to the cafe," she whispered. "She said she was from your press office. She threatened me, Ethan. She said the tabloids think I targeted you. She took photos. My manager asked me to leave." There was a long, heavy silence on the line, and then she heard Ethan exhale sharply. "Emily, I am so sorry. They acted without my approval. I would never let anyone treat you that way." Her eyes burned. "But they did. And now, I think I lost my job." Ethan's voice softened, but there was steel beneath it. "You did nothing wrong. I will fix this. I promise you." Emily laughed weakly, not out of humor, but disbelief. "I cannot be fixed, Ethan. I am just a waitress. I do not belong in your world." "Yes, you do," he insisted. "And this is my fault. Let me make it right. Please, can we meet? I am close to you. I can be there in 10 minutes. She hesitated, fear and exhaustion carrying equal weight. But she also remembered Nora's little hand in hers, the laminated star sticker, the way Ethan's voice sounded when he talked about her future. "All right," she whispered. "I am at the corner near the bakery." "Stay there," he said quickly. "I am coming." Emily hung up and wrapped her arms tighter around her body, trying not to crumble completely. As she waited, cars passed by, their headlights reflecting off melting ice. Her breath fogged the air, each exhale a shaky cloud. Within minutes, a dark SUV pulled up, and Ethan stepped out. No coat, no hesitation, as if the cold did not matter. His eyes scanned her instantly, relief washing over his face when he saw she was unharmed. "Emily," he breathed, moving toward her. "Thank God." She looked down, suddenly ashamed. "You should not be seen with me right now." "I do not care what anyone thinks," he said firmly. "I care about you." The words startled her, but before she could respond, Ethan gestured to the car. "Please, let us go somewhere safe to talk." She nodded weakly and climbed inside. The warmth of the car wrapped around her, making her realize just how cold she had been. Ethan slid in beside her and shut the door, shutting out the chaos of the world outside. "Emily," he began, his voice low, "the woman who confronted you does not speak for me. She acted on her own. She thought she was protecting the company image, but she crossed a line. I have already removed her from her position." Emily blinked. "You fired her?" "Effective immediately," he said. "No one gets to intimidate you. Not on my watch." The sincerity in his tone made her chest ache. She looked away, struggling to steady her breath. Ethan, I do not want to ruin your reputation or your company's reputation. I do not want to be the girl who gets dragged into tabloid stories. You are not ruining anything, he said gently. The problem is not you. The problem is the narrative being twisted without your consent. He reached into the pocket of his coat and pulled out something small, placing it carefully on the seat between them. It was the laminated star sticker, the one Nora had given her first, but now it was framed inside a tiny clear case. Beneath it was a folded sheet of paper. Emily lifted it hesitantly and opened it. Her breath caught. It was a printed acceptance letter from a community scholarship program, approved and signed. Her name was on it. This is from our foundation, Ethan explained. A full scholarship to begin training toward your nursing career. You are exactly the kind of person this program was created for. Emily felt tears sting her eyes. Why are you doing this? Ethan leaned closer, his voice steady, sincere, unshaken by the chaos swirling around them. Because you earned it the moment you chose kindness, he said. And because I believe in you more than you believe in yourself. She covered her mouth with her hand, her heart trembling violently, not from fear this time, but from an overwhelming mix of relief, gratitude, and something softer she was scared to name. Ethan continued, let me protect you from this mess. Let me help you rise. You do not owe me anything, Emily, but I want you to have the life you deserve. And as she stared at him through tear-blurred eyes, she realized the storm had not come to destroy her. It had come to change her life forever. Emily held the scholarship letter against her chest, as if it might disappear if she loosened her grip, her breath unsteady as she tried to process everything that had happened. She had walked into that day expecting nothing more than another shift at the cafe and maybe a bowl of instant noodles for dinner. Instead, she now sat in a warm car beside a man she barely knew, yet who believed in her with a fierce confidence she had never received from anyone. Ethan watched her closely, his eyes softening when he saw the tears she tried to hide. Emily, he said softly, you are safe now. I promise. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her sleeve. I do not feel safe. Not yet. The press, the cafe, the rumors, it is too much. Then let me carry the weight for you, he replied gently. You have carried enough alone. His words cracked something inside her, a piece of armor she had built over years of disappointment and exhaustion. She looked down at the scholarship letter again, tracing her name printed in bold ink. This could change everything, she whispered. It will, Ethan said, if you let it. The car grew quiet, the hum of the engine almost soothing. For the first time in a long time, Emily allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival. Classrooms, textbooks, a clean uniform, a job where she helped people every day instead of serving coffee for tips that never stretched far enough. She imagined stability, purpose, hope. What do I do now? She asked quietly. You come with me to the foundation, Ethan said. We will get you settled into temporary housing, help you prepare for classes, introduce you to the team. You will have support. You will not face this alone. Emily exhaled slowly, as if releasing years of fear. Okay, she said, her voice trembling but determined. I want this chance. I choose it. A relieved smile broke across Ethan's face. Good, he said. It is yours. The SUV pulled away from the curb, carrying Emily toward a life she had once buried under bills and broken dreams. As they drove through the city, her phone buzzed again, but this time it was a message from an unknown reporter demanding a comment. She turned the phone off and placed it face down on her lap. It no longer mattered. When they arrived at the foundation building, it towered above her in glass and steel, intimidating yet full of possibility. Ethan led her through the lobby, introducing her to staff members who greeted her warmly, without judgment or superiority. She was shown a temporary apartment nearby, not extravagant, not overwhelming, but clean and warm, with a kitchen that worked and a heater that clicked on without struggling. Emily stood in the middle of the small living room, absorbing the feeling of real stability for the first time in her life. Nora burst through the doorway at that moment, beaming as she ran over to show Emily a drawing she had made, the three of them holding hands under a sky full of stars. This one is for you, Nora said proudly. Because you are part of our team now. Emily knelt down and hugged the little girl tightly, emotion swelling inside her. Thank you, sweet girl, she whispered. Later that evening, Ethan stood with her on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The air was cold, but not bitter like earlier. It felt clean, full of breath, full of beginnings. Emily, he said quietly, I want you to know something. I did not help you out of guilt or responsibility. I helped you because I see your strength. I see your heart, and I have not been inspired by anyone in a very long time. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. Ethan, he held her gaze, not demanding, not pushing, just offering. You changed my life with one act of kindness, he said. Let me spend the rest of mine proving that you were right to believe in me, even when you did not know who I was. Emily felt her breath catch. It was not a confession of love, not yet. It was something deeper, a promise. A vow born from the kind of authenticity that could not be bought or faked. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers fitting between his as if they had been waiting for that moment. Then let us rise together, she whispered. In the weeks that followed, the storm faded. Ethan publicly defended her, clarifying the truth and calling her kindness the catalyst for positive change. Newspapers shifted their headlines. The cafe apologized and offered her job back, but she politely declined. She was no longer a waitress struggling to survive. She was a student, a future nurse, a woman standing on her own path. And she was no longer alone. On the day her classes began, Emily found a small framed gift waiting on her desk at the foundation. The original cafe receipt from the morning she bought Ethan and Nora their drinks, preserved behind glass. Beneath it, a note written in Ethan's unmistakably steady handwriting. This is where your new life began. Thank you for choosing kindness. Emily pressed the frame to her heart, her eyes shining. She stepped into her future with steady breath and lifted chin, knowing something she had forgotten long ago. Kindness, even the smallest kind, always returns. And sometimes it brings a family with it.